Let me just review with you guys back. All right, well, thank you everyone for attending. As you said, I am the project coordinator at KickIt California for our student e-referral for cessation and alternative to suspension program, YVAPE. So our agenda for today is to first talk about the e-referral for cessation services, which will be include an overview of KickIt California services, the e-referral process, and then additional considerations such as texting, school reports, and data security. For YVAPE, I'll be providing an overview, discussing school registration, the program steps, and school reports, and then end with a real quick comparison between the e-referral for cessation services and YVAPE. It can get a bit confusing about which program should be used, so hopefully that will help further distinguish them. So KickIt California offers both cessation services and alternative to suspension for students. In TUPE terms, the e-referral to KIC would be considered a tobacco cessation program. We also offer YVAPE, which is our alternative to suspension and restorative justice program. So in TUPE terms, this would be considered a tobacco and marijuana vaping intervention program because students may not be ready to quit, but they are users. Our cessation services are funded by the California Department of Public Health, while YVAPE is funded by the California Department of Education. Both programs are free of charge, although for both students must be at least 13 years old to participate. And this is due to some current policy restrictions on providing individualized counseling and education to children. So first, I'm going to talk about our e-referral for cessation services. KIC offers a variety of tobacco cessation services. And for the cessation services, it is tobacco only, no marijuana for the cessation services. So some of these services are individual telephone coaching, a texting program, online chat, smartphone apps, an Alexa skill, and also more traditional self-help materials. Today, I'm just going to be focusing on the first two, the individual telephone coaching and the texting program, because these programs are more proactive, whereas our other programs, such as the phone app, are more self-guided. So our telephone coaching is evidence-based. We've been providing service for around 30 years and have tested the counseling protocols in randomized trials. It's also clinically rich. So while we have tested protocols, they are tailored to the individual and their specific needs. So the protocols kind of focus on motivation, ambivalence, planning, and skill building. And then also having proactive calls also provides kind of a soft version of accountability, and that the appointment is set and then a KIC coach will call the client at those times. We also provide support, and our coaching is also culturally sensitive and is offered in English, Spanish, Mandarin, Cantonese, Korean, and Vietnamese. So next I'll go over the e-referral process. The page is housed in the KickIt California website. So here's the URL. It's kickitca.org/student-referral-form. You can start using it today if you have any students who need help with cessation. The first thing that happens is that students will express their interest in being referred. So this could be to a school nurse, a TUPE coordinator, a coach, teacher, or someone else at the school. And they only really need to express an interest in being referred. So they don't have to be quite ready to quit to use our cessation services, as readiness to quit goes up and down over time, and the coaches will help kind of explore their ambivalence about that. As I mentioned, though, they do need to be at least 13 years old. So these images show you what the page looks like. The following screenshots are all from the same web page, but I broke them down to make them look a little easier to view. So this is the very top. And then the first thing that you will enter is the school administrator's contact information, or whoever it is that is referring the student. It doesn't have to be an assistant principal or anything. So you include their first name and last names, email, phone number. And we ask for the school administrator's contact information in case we need to follow up with someone at the school. And this may also be the person that we send the aggregate report to. The next thing you do is we'll search for your school by entering the school's name, zip code, and county. And a list of schools matching the criteria you entered will appear. Then you just select your school. So knowing that school information allows us to track how many referrals you have submitted. So then we can provide a report to you at the end of the semester, which could be useful, particularly if you're a TUPE school and need to report these things. And so I'll discuss the report a little bit later. If you cannot find your school, just call us at this phone number and we'll have your school added and can help you through that through the enrollment process. Once you found your school, you will enter the student's information, including their first and last names, phone number, preferred language, and the product they are trying to quit. We'll also need you to check a box down here at the bottom, affirming that the individual student's consent has been given to share contact information with KIC for the purposes of offering services. You'll be able to add up to 5 students at a time. If you want to refer more than 5 students, just enter those first 5, submit the form, and then start with a new form. This way, if there's an error in submission, you won't have to re-enter 10 whole new students. Lastly, you just verify that you're not a robot, and that's all you have to do to refer a student to our cessation services. Basically, at that point, your job is done, and we take over from there. So next, I'd just like to go over some suggested refer good practices. So stay informed about the e-referral process and KIC services, which you're doing by being here today. Reinforce the student's interest in quitting tobacco and or vaping. Briefly explain to the student what they should expect after being referred, which I'll be going over today. And then get verbal consent from the student to be contacted by us. And then follow up with the student directly about their experience with KIC cessation services. Because this is not the alternative suspension program, there are confidentiality aspects on our end with the student. So you can get more information from them than we could give you about them, essentially. And then offer the student congratulations and encouragement on their tobacco and or vaping cessation efforts. So what happens after the referral? So once you hit that submit button. So first, I'd just like to provide an example of a study that KickIt California has conducted with pregnant smokers who were referred by their healthcare provider. So while it's not the same situation, it is similar. In this case, the student would be like the pregnant smokers and the school would be like the healthcare provider. And the reason I'm using this example is, one, we haven't conducted a randomized control trial yet with students. And secondly, it's because pregnant smokers should be highly motivated to quit smoking. There were 1,555 pregnant smokers in the study. There were 2 branches of the study. So in this first branch on the left, that's yellow. The healthcare provider advised the pregnant smokers to call KickIt California. So they gave them our information and told them basically to refer themselves. These women should be motivated to quit, yet only 3% of those advised to call actually ended up calling us. So a very small number who was given our information actually called. In the other branch of the study, this blue side that has a bit more going on, the healthcare provider proactively referred the pregnant smokers to KickIt California so that our coaches proactively called expectant mothers. And of course, this was with the pregnant mother's consent. So out of those whose information we were given to call, which would be similar to what you guys would be doing by signing up the student on the e-referral site, 31% were unreachable, which is here. And so this could be because they had changed their numbers or they just changed their mind or just never answered our calls. However, we were able to reach 2/3 of those referred. 24% did end up refusing service. So they changed their mind from at the point that they talked to their provider, while 45% accepted counseling. So 45% may not sound like a lot, but this is a 15-fold increase compared to the 3% who called us when they were advised. So that's a huge increase when you use proactive referral rather than having the smoker refer themselves after being given information. So essentially, this just shows that proactive referral can make a huge difference. So as I mentioned, we haven't conducted an RCT with students yet, but our director's estimate is that the proportion of students who will call for coaching service and the proportion of students who will accept the coaching service when contacted by KIC coaches will likely be half of those shown on the previous slide. So instead of 3% who call when advised, he believes it'd likely be closer to 1.5%. And instead of 45% who accept counseling when proactively called, it'd likely be closer to 20 to 25%. And this is because we believe that students will probably be less motivated to quit than pregnant smokers. And while these numbers seem small, those who are referred via the e-referral page and proactively called could be up to 20 times more likely to receive coaching than those who are just advised to call us. So it can still make a huge difference using this kind of e-referral. And since this is a relatively new program, we don't have much data like this yet, but we're hoping to in the future so we can actually show data on students rather than pregnant smokers.
Dr. Linneman, quick question for the referral process. For students, is there a parent consent requirement for referral to cessation services?
No, there is not. For YVAPE, there is, but for the cessation services, you only need the student's assent is all. And you just have to click that box is it. Okay, so what can the school expect? Well, KickIt California can provide accessibility and consistency in service, so kind of like a safety net. We're open Monday through Friday from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. and Saturday 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. So we're available both during and outside of school hours. So whatever works best for your students. We have trained staff using a proven protocol tested with randomized trials and have ongoing quality control with supervisors reviewing and helping with difficult cases. We also have proactive coaching and texting, which is shown to increase the likelihood that services will be received, as I showed you guys in that study. So next I'll discuss the KickIt California workflow. So here's a diagram of our standard referral path. So KickIt California receives the e-referral from the school. KIC then attempts student contact within 2 business days to enroll them in services. So KIC attempts to contact the student multiple times over a 2-week period. The student will either be reached or not reached. If the student is reached, they will either complete the intake or decline services. If they complete the intake, they will either choose to receive coaching or materials only. If they choose coaching, they will go on to complete an initial coaching session and a series of follow-up calls. And then if they choose materials only, then we will send them our self-help materials. Here's just a photo of one of our KickIt staff, so you have a sense of who students who we'll be talking to. To give you a sense of our organization, I thought I'd give an overview of our staff. So on the clinical side, we have 55 quit coaches. Most of them are bilingual and with English plus either Spanish, Mandarin, Cantonese, Korean, or Vietnamese. Most have a bachelor's or master's degree in psychology or health-related fields. They're supervised by 6 quit coach supervisors. And then we also have a service delivery manager, a clinical director, an assistant clinical director, and a medical director. And then on my side, the research side, there's research, communications, IT, and admin, and there's about 55 of us across these 4 departments. So our coaches go through a 60-hour in-house training that includes varied formats such as lecture, discussion, role play, as well as some others. And then this training is then followed by an intensive 1-month apprenticeship. To give you an overview of our quit coaching phone protocol, the intake call is that first initial call, and that takes about 8 to 10 minutes, and that's where they determine needs, and also where the student decides whether they want to receive coaching or materials. If they choose to receive coaching, then they'll have an initial call, which is 25 to 30 minutes, and that is in preparation to quit. So here's kind of where they just pick a quit date, determine what their quit plan is going to be, and get ready to essentially quit smoking or vaping or whatever tobacco use they need help with. And then there's a series of proactive follow-up calls. So there's up to 4 calls. They typically are 5 to 10 minutes, and they're on a relapse sensitive schedule. So people are more likely to relapse early on in quitting. So there's more calls in that first week, and then they taper off over time. And the focus here really is on relapse prevention. Next, we'll discuss some additional program considerations. So our texting program mirrors our telephone coaching. Students are encouraged to set a quit date. Then the texts are adjusted for content and timing, so they're relevant to the stage students are on their journey to quitting, which could be motivation, planning, getting support, self-talk, or recovering from slips, since most people who quit tend to slip here and there. Students can also respond to any text, which will be routed to a quit coach who will make a tailored response within 1 business day. The texting program can reach a broader audience who may not be ready to talk to a coach, and this may be especially true of students who may prefer texting. So texting for our students became available November 2021, so we're almost a year in now. To enroll students in the texting program, all you have to do is actually have them text quit smokes or kick smokes, excuse me, or kick vapes to 66819 for English, and then the following keywords for Spanish, simple Chinese, traditional Chinese, Korean, and Vietnamese. Your school can also receive a semester report from KickIt California, allowing you to track the number of referrals sent and the aggregate status of those referrals. Here's a sample report. It provides information on total referrals, the number of students contacted, those that we were unable to contact, and those we're still attempting to reach. Out of those contacted, we can provide information on those who chose coaching, materials, no service, and then declined services. And then out of those who chose coaching, we can provide the number that completed their first coaching call. And again, because there are some confidentiality aspects, we tend to only provide these if a school sends us 5 or more students. So that way there's not specific information on an individual student. And then lastly, I'm just going to briefly touch on data security. Basically, the security of patient information is of paramount importance to us. KickIt California and UC San Diego Health are HIPAA covered entities. And so we must comply with HIPAA privacy, security, and high-tech breach final rules. Since this is not my area of expertise, if you would like to know more information about our data security, you can use this link and read all about it. And then lastly, like I said, for consent, schools can only release student info to KickIt California with the student's permission. So you just need to obtain oral consent from the student and then just check that box on that enrollment form that I showed you. And then here's our English flyer for the e-referral, which explains the program, and we can provide this to your school. And the Spanish version will be available soon. The translation was just finished today, so we just need our graphic design artist to add the Spanish language to essentially will look just like this. So that should be done in the coming weeks. And then just lastly, here's a URL one more time before I move on to YVAPE. So next is YVAPE, which stands for Youth Vaping Alternative Program Education. We tend to just call it YVAPE. It's less of a mouthful. So for an overview, YVAPE is a free alternative to suspension and restorative justice program focused on phone coaching and education. It's available for students facing disciplinary action for vaping nicotine or cannabis at California public middle and high schools. So this is where the 2 programs really differ. YVAPE is specifically for students who are facing disciplinary action or who got caught vaping at school. Whereas the other program, they don't need to have gotten caught, they just need help with cessation. So for YVAPE, the students may or may not want to quit. It's just that they got caught at school and are basically in a bit of trouble. And so this is one thing that they can do. So YVAPE is available in both English and Spanish. At least all our materials are in both. If there is a student who would like to speak to a coach in one of our Asian languages, we should be able to arrange that, although our materials are currently only available in English and Spanish. And as I mentioned, YVAPE is funded by the CDE. So before I go into detail about YVAPE, I'd like to first discuss some background research, starting with prevalence rates. So this figure on this slide, as well as the following slides, are from the 2019 to 20 California Student Tobacco Survey using 8th, 10th, and 12th grade students, which is a survey that we used to administer. This was, I believe, the last years that we did it. There were 162,675 students in the sample, and the sample is representative of California students. So lifetime use of cigarettes was 5.3%, vapes was 20.3%, and cannabis was 25.3%, whereas 30-day use of cigarettes was 1.1%, vapes was 6.8%, and cannabis was 12.1%. So this figure shows that vapes have noticeably surpassed cigarette use, even though these numbers are lower than some previous years, and while cannabis use is more prevalent than both. So this figure shows that 36% of students report that they have had a classmate caught for using cigarettes, vapes, or marijuana at school in the last semester. So it's a pretty large percentage of students who know someone who has been caught for this at school. And then out of the students who reported that they had a classmate who was caught using at school, 72.5% said that the classmate was caught with vapes, 26.4% with marijuana, and 1.2% with cigarettes. So students are caught with vapes by far the most, followed by marijuana. However, when we asked this question, we didn't specify what was in the vapes. So the vapes could have been just flavoring, nicotine, or even marijuana vapes. So these slides really suggest that the students' use of vapes and marijuana at school are really a significant problem that schools are facing. And so YVAPE was essentially developed to just help schools and students kind of address this issue. So YVAPE goals include reducing recidivism and suspensions among students vaping, educating students about vaping, providing help to students who want help on cessation, and provide students a positive experience with KickIt California, and to be there for schools who do not have a program in place or who would just like to have an additional option to the programs that they already have. So before referring your students to YVAPE, each school should register with YVAPE. So this is a little different than the e-referral for cessation. You can do this simply by sending an email to yvape-support@health.ucsd.edu and designating a school site contact. So that can be an assistant principal, or sometimes it's a TUPE coordinator. And the reason why we do this is because we explain student eligibility and then the YVAPE steps. We also update schools on student progress. We send emails throughout the students' journey through the program. So because this is a kind of a alternative suspension restorative justice program, there's a bit less confidentiality with YVAPE than with the e-referral for cessation. So we send emails to the school letting them know whether the student has been answering our calls, whether they've completed the program, and if they haven't, kind of how many steps they've made it through. So the schools are a bit more informed about the students with this, although we still don't discuss what the students said in the coaching calls with the school, just their progress. This also allows us to provide schools with reports. We provide those each semester. And then it also allows us to estimate demand and train more coaches if needed. Only a subset of the KickIt California coaches are trained specifically for YVAPE. So if we get a lot of schools registering with us, particularly large ones, then we train more YVAPE coaches to keep up with that demand. This is an overview of YVAPE steps. There's first is enrollment, the initial call, videos and discussion, the follow-up call, and then a brief post-program survey. So I'll talk about each step in greater detail next. So the first step of YVAPE is enrollment. So when a student is facing disciplinary action for vaping for school, the school first needs to determine eligibility for YVAPE. So the first is that the student is 13 years or older. The second is that they vape nicotine or cannabis. Now, this is a new thing this year for YVAPE. We didn't previously allow cannabis, but the CDE has allowed us to expand to include vaping cannabis, which is great. It was the #1 request from schools to expand our eligibility the past 2 years. So now we're doing cannabis and have a separate cannabis protocol. The student also needs to have a parent or guardian who provides permission for teen participation, and this is if they're under the age of 18. If they're 18, the student can just provide their own consent. And then lastly, the student needs to have an email address and access to a phone, since this is a tech-based intervention. So if the student is eligible, the school would tell the student and parent or guardian about YVAPE. The school would then collect the signed consent form and provide them to YVAPE, sending them to that support email address. And the consent forms are downloadable from our website, which I'll show you guys. And then in the coming months, we hope to be launching DocuSign for consent forms to make it a more streamlined and easier process. So at that point, after enrollment, DocuSign would just automatically email the forms to the parent and student. And so it removes some of the work from the schools. Then the school enrolls the student at yvape.org. And then upon enrollment, an email is sent to the student, parent, and school. The student will also receive an enrollment text message. We find that students tend to check their text messages a bit more than their emails. So we use both. And then the email to the student and parent will explain the program, while the email to the school will confirm to them that the student was enrolled. So here's the website. So I'll show you guys the website. So I was on the videos page, but this is going to look a bit different next semester. We're currently in the process of rebuilding the whole website, essentially, but it'll have a lot of the similar content anyway. So the first thing you want to do is go to the consent forms, which is here. And then you just hit this download and print. These two consent forms are actually the same. This is what they look like. They're just one page. It kind of explains the program, what will happen, any risks, benefits. And then they just select if they're 13 or 18. And if they're 18, you just need the student side. If they're 13 to 17, then you need both the student and parent side. So that's all that is. And then you send those to yvape-support@health.ucsd.edu. And then right here is where you refer the student. So once you get those consent forms, you just click that, and then you type in the school's information, and then yeah, I'm gonna show you guys. You actually have to type things in for this. And then it goes to the student's information. So first, last name, preferred name, date of birth, their grade level, their email, phone number, and language, their preferred language. And with the language that you choose, it'll send all their emails and text messages in that language. So if it's English or Spanish. And then lastly, so, yeah. Must be 13. Okay, 90. And then lastly, you just fill in the parent's information. So just their first name or guardian, last name, email address, and phone number. And then you just write in the reason for the referral. So that could just be caught vaping in the bathroom, or something as simple as that you can write in. And then it just says the referral date and then the preferred language for the parent. So you can have a different preferred language for the student versus the parent. And then the parent emails will all be sent in the language selected. And then that's it for once you hit submit or next, then that enrolls the student and you'll receive a enrollment confirmation email. And then those enrollment emails explaining the program will go out to the student and parent, as well as a text message to the student. And then the About Us section just provides information about KickIt California's other services. So it has, you can just kind of click on these and it pulls up what you want. So there's chat, the text, if they request a callback. So if you find that you want to also explore cessation, this is one way to do it. And then also from the home page, you can find the videos at the bottom. If you'd like to watch them for yourselves. And then I'll be showing you at least one video, maybe two if we have time. But you can also watch the rest of them if you're interested at home. And then the webpage is also available in Spanish. And so as I mentioned, that we're currently updating the YVAPE website though, so it may look different in a few months. Okay. So the second step of YVAPE is the initial call. So first I'll kind of discuss the procedural aspects and then go over the coaching topics. So the student has the option to schedule a time for their initial call and if they want a voice or video Zoom call. So that scheduling option is provided in their enrollment email and their enrollment text. If they don't schedule their own appointment, then a YVAPE coach just proactively calls them, typically the next business day. Attempts are made around 4 p.m., 6 p.m., 7 p.m., and 8 p.m. on weekdays and between 1 to 4 p.m. on Saturdays. A reminder email is sent to the student, parent, and school after 5 missed calls. And that reminder email also provides our YVAPE phone number so the student can call in instead if we're having a hard time reaching them. The student also receives a reminder text message. And then the initial call tends to last around 15 to 20 minutes. So it's the longest of the calls. Students can talk to the coaches much longer though, if they have a lot of questions or there's a lot of things that they want to explore. There isn't a time limit. This is just what we found is typical for YVAPE students so far. Here are the YVAPE coaching topics for the initial call. So a lot of it is with deals with rapport building, so making the student feel comfortable. They discuss how they ended up in YVAPE, so the situation surrounding how they ended up getting caught at school, or how they ended up starting vaping, those type of issues. What they'd like to learn about vaping or tobacco or marijuana, their vaping behavior, their likes and dislikes about vaping, health in vaping, and then also their motivation and confidence about cessation. There are a few differences between the nicotine protocol and the cannabis protocol. The psychoeducational points on health are unique for nicotine, for the nicotine protocol, and cannabis for the cannabis protocol. And there's also some slight wording changes between the protocols as well, but otherwise they're pretty similar. The third step is videos and discussion. So we really encourage parents to participate in this activity so that they can learn about vaping and open a dialogue. However, parental participation is completely voluntary, and students are not penalized whatsoever if their parent doesn't participate. So we worked with a video production company and launched our own videos last summer. The topics are marketing manipulation by the vaping industry, health effects of vaping nicotine, health effects of vaping marijuana, understanding motivation, and personal responsibility. The videos take approximately 15 minutes to watch. They tend to be on average around 3 minutes. Some might be a little longer, like 4 minutes. And you can watch them all on yvape.org. We're also currently producing 2 new videos this semester that should be ready by New Year's. On the effects of marijuana on the brain and lungs. We found that students are really interested in the brain and lungs, the health effects on those aspects. And then on dealing with stress, we found that dealing with stress was one of the top reasons students gave us for why they were vaping. So we're producing a video on that as well, and we're working with the same video production company. So those videos should look very similar to the one I'll be showing you. There's also 8 questions for students and parents to discuss with each other if the parent decides to participate. If the parent doesn't participate, a YVAPE coach may discuss those questions with the student during the follow-up call instead. So some examples of the questions are, how do you think vaping will affect your health in the long term? And how do you think your life would change if you stop vaping? So I'll show you maybe the first 2 videos. I think we'll have time. So you can get a sense of what they're like, and then you can visit the YVAPE webpage to watch the rest on your own. So people can visit the videos here, just on the home page. Otherwise, what students and parents will see is they get a unique link that takes them to this page. So this is a videos page, and then it also has those discussion questions at the bottom of the page. So the first I'll show you, and students can watch these in any order. We also don't expect them to watch all the videos. Essentially, as long as they tell our coach that they watch some of the videos in the follow-up call, we'll proceed with the follow-up call. If they haven't watched any of the videos, then the coach encourages them to watch them and then reschedules that follow-up call for a time once the student has had a chance to watch some of them. So we'll just watch marketing manipulation and health effects, I think. So for each 3 minutes long.
There are many reasons why people vape. It could be because of friends or flavors or nicotine, or it could be the tons of ads and posts hitting us all the time. In today's digital world where there are so many ads and images popping up, brands need to stand out. Brands that are cool and easy to remember have a better chance of getting people to use their products. The more times ads are seen and heard, the more likely people are to choose that product, even if it is more expensive. Strange, right? Why pay more for something when there are cheaper options out there? It all has to do with something called marketing manipulation. Ads are meant to make people feel a certain way, but mostly they are meant to get people to buy a product and use it again and again and again. The tobacco industry, for example, wants people to feel good about the products they sell. The thing is, even though the harmful effects of tobacco are well known, it hasn't stopped tobacco companies from advertising their products. Instead of just advertising cigarettes, they have turned their attention to vapes. And now vaping companies have joined in too. What's the message for these new ads? Vapes are safe and cool. Companies need new customers to keep them in business, so they found a way to get as much information as they can to recruit new users. They already know who will probably buy vapes because they have put a lot of money into finding out what people like. So how do they find out what people like? Social media.
We're gonna be doing a jewel vape hot box for you guys. Not really a hot box, but more like a challenge. Like how far can you go with nicotine before it's like dangerous?
Social media platforms have data on every user. They watch for all the things people like and share. Then they use this info to target current and future users online. That very same information is also sold to other companies to get people to see their products. They also use neuromarketing to find out what images, colors, and sounds make people buy products in certain ways. Which is why we see ads and social media posts that appeal to young people with attractive models that look like teens. Ads and posts that show happiness and relaxation, or that show sex and romance, friendship and party scenes. All of them are made to get your attention and have you think you need to vape to be a part of it all. Does it all work? The vaping industry's focus is to make money. The way they do that is to get as many young people as possible to start using their products as early as possible, so they can have a customer for life. Marketing manipulation is meant to trick you. The more ad awareness you have, the better decisions you can make about what products to use.
It actually was going to go into the one that I meant to play next. So this next one is on health effects of vaping.
Tobacco smoking has been around for hundreds of years. As early as the 1700s, the Virginia Company was mass-producing tobacco. Even back then, many people thought tobacco smoking wasn't healthy, but they continued to smoke because of the addictive nature of nicotine. What about today? The message now is vaping is a healthier way to get nicotine than smoking. But vaping hasn't been around that long. There has not been enough time to learn about the long-term health risks of vaping. What we do know is that vaping affects the lungs because vapes have toxic chemicals and metals in them, like formaldehyde, acrolein, lead, and chromium. Vapes also give nicotine to the user. Nicotine causes heart rate and blood pressure to go up. And one other big thing, nicotine causes changes in the brain. One change is that nicotine makes the brain release feel-good chemicals like dopamine. The brain gets used to this, which means that after a while, the user needs nicotine just to feel normal. And when people try to quit, it's hard to stay quit. What keeps this going are vapes like Juul and Puff Bar. These products give high levels of nicotine by using nicotine salts. Salts allow for higher concentrations to be inhaled more easily and absorbed faster than older vape devices. Why is this a problem? For teens, too much nicotine can really mess with brain development. The teen brain still needs time to develop before it can run like an adult brain. The brain also needs a strong link between thinking and processing to work at a high level. Nicotine attacks this process and can cause lasting problems like not being able to control impulses and anxiety, and can lead to issues with learning and attention. Because addiction is a form of learning, youth can get addicted more easily than adults. A developing brain is easier to hook for life. Brain development sets the stage for adult life. The more awareness you have about this, the better decisions you'll be able to make, and the greater the chance your brain will develop in the most healthy way.
All right, so that gives you kind of a sense of what the videos are like. In addition to the kind of the tobacco and marijuana focused one. So the next one is just about vaping marijuana. And then our new one will be about how vaping marijuana affects the brain and lungs. We also have a video on understanding motivation and personal responsibility. So kind of getting more at some of the emotional development aspects of things that might be affecting student use. And so adding to that will be dealing with stress. So those are the videos. And then the fourth step, after students have watched some of the videos, hopefully all of them, but at least some of them, the fourth step is that follow-up call. So during the initial call, the student will schedule their follow-up voice or video call with the coach that they had. If the student misses their appointment, then a YVAPE coach will proactively call them on successive days for up to 5 attempts. Similar to the initial call, a reminder email is sent to the student, parent, and school after 5 missed calls. The student also receives a reminder text message. The follow-up calls tend to last around 10 minutes, and the coach will send the survey link to the student and ask them if they've received the link before getting off the call. So here are the YVAPE coaching topics for the follow-up call. The coach essentially just checks in with the student, see how they've been doing since they last talked to them. They'll review the videos, so kind of discuss what the students saw, what if they had any thoughts about them, any questions about the topics that came up in the videos, whether there was any changes in the students' vaping behavior since the coach initially talked to them, and then addressing any questions that the students may have about vaping or health or anything kind of within this realm. So for the nicotine protocol, the coaches will also invite the students to utilize other KickIt California services, particularly if the student wants to work on cessation further, they can essentially enroll them right then in the cessation services that I kind of mentioned before. And they can do that intake on the phone with them right there if they want to continue receiving calls to help with quitting. Because KickIt California in general doesn't offer marijuana cessation services, if the student wants further help with cessation of marijuana, then the coach will refer them out to SAMHSA for that cannabis help. The coaches end the call then by reminding students to check their email or text messages for a link to the post-program e-survey, and tells them that it needs to be completed to complete the program. And if you're not aware, SAMHSA is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. And then the final step of the program is just a quick 3 to 5 minute post-program online survey. It has 8 to 10 questions, kind of depending on skip patterns with their responses. And it asks about changes in vaping status and quitting intentions, whether talking to the quit coaches was helpful, whether their parents were involved, and if so, was that helpful? If they gained any knowledge from watching the videos, and what they liked about YVAPE, and any recommendations to improve YVAPE. And those last 2 questions, what they liked and recommendations, those are the only open-ended questions, and they're also the 2 questions that aren't required. Those are optional if the student wants to write something in or not, they don't have to. However, it is very helpful for us if they do, because we use that information to help make improvements to the program for the following year. If the student has not completed the survey, there are reminder texts and emails sent to the student at 48 hours and then at 1 week. And then completion of the post-program survey completes the program. An email then goes out to the school, parent, and student confirming that the student completed YVAPE. The student also receives this certificate of completion. And then if a student does not complete the program, 4 weeks after enrollment, an email goes out to the student, parent, and school. This email informs everyone of the activities the student has not completed. So for example, if the student completes the initial call only, then the email will state that the student has not completed the follow-up call and survey. And then we also in this email provide our phone number again, because the student can still call in at this point and complete the program. If we never hear from them, then we do consider this the end of us reaching out. But if the student or school contacts us, we can reactivate that student, and we'll start the 5 call attempts all over from the point that they last left off. So we'll give the student as many chances as they'd like if they call back in, or the school does, or parent. We also provide semester reports in January and July. So the January report covers the whole fall semester. So it goes from July 1st to December 31st. And then the July report goes from January 1st to June 30th. So the reports provide data on referrals and completion rates. So this is what the overall report looks like, but I'll zoom in on the top and bottom half so it's a bit easier to see. So here's the top half of the report. It provides data on the number of students enrolled. The second layer shows the number of students who are still in progress at the end of the semester versus those with a completion status. The bottom layer shows unreachable students, which are those students that we could not reach for even that initial call. So we made those 5 attempts. We sent out the notifications to the student, school, and parents as a reminder email to tell them to have the student call us, and we still never heard from the student at all. So those are considered unreachable. And then next is partial completion. So these are students who completed at least an initial call, but may not have completed all parts of the program. So we were able to at least reach them and they finished that initial call. Maybe they did both the initial and follow-up call, but not the survey. So they fall into that category. And then finally, there are those students who are complete. So they completed the initial call, follow-up call, and the post-program survey. Here's the bottom half of the report. So it shows you the number of students in each grade. So this report just shows 9th through 12th, but if you have students in 7th or 8th grade enrolled, then this figure would also include them. It also shows the students' vaping status as of the post-program survey. So once they left the program, where were they in terms of vaping? So now I'm going to show you guys some evaluation data from last year. So this shows the completion rates for year 2 of YVAPE, which was July 2021 to June 2022. There were 149 students. It's just kind of interesting because we've already had that many just this year or in the first few months of this year. So enrollment rates have really skyrocketed. A big part of that is due to schools being fully back essentially and not doing kind of hybrid COVID pandemic things. So there'll be a lot more students in next year's evaluation. But for this previous year, there was 149 students enrolled. 63% completed all parts of the program. 19% completed at least an initial call, but did not complete all parts. 1% were still in progress at the end of the reporting year, and then 17% were unreachable, meaning we could not reach them for their initial call. This slide shows completion rates for those students we were able to reach. So this excludes those unreachable students, which is why the initial call rate is 100% here. So out of those students we were able to reach, 80% completed their follow-up call, while 76% completed the whole program. So the completion rate really increased 13% when we were able to reach students. This figure essentially shows the crosstabs for students reported vaping at the initial call, which is this left side, versus their vaping status at the post-program survey, so at the end of the program. So 22 of the 23 students who reported they just got caught that one time during the initial call were still not vaping at all at the end of the program. One ended up vaping some days. 36 of the 39 students who reported that they were not vaping at all initially because they'd already quit between the time they got caught and starting YVAPE. 36 were still not vaping at all by the end. One said they were vaping some days and 2 said they were vaping every day. Out of the 21 students who started the program vaping some days, 13 were vaping not at all. So they actually decreased their vaping by the end of the program. 7 stayed right where they were, and then 1 progressed to every day. And then finally, out of the 9 who started the program vaping every day, 6 still vaped every day. 1 had decreased to some days, and 2 had completely quit vaping. So even though YVAPE's focus really isn't on cessation, it still is showing some results regarding cessation. Students are moving in that direction. This figure is from the post-program survey. So it shows that 76% of students agreed or strongly agreed that talking to the YVAPE counselors was helpful, while 21% neither agreed or disagreed. And then only 3% disagreed or strongly agreed. I think you're always going to have a bit of pushback from teenagers, particularly when they are required to do something. This figure is also from the post-program survey, and it shows that 82% of students agreed or strongly agreed that they learned something from watching the YVAPE videos, while 13% neither agreed nor disagreed, and then only 5% disagreed or strongly disagreed, that they didn't think they learned anything from watching the YVAPE videos. This figure is also from the post-program survey. Students reported that 50% of the parents watched their videos with them. Because parental participation is completely voluntary, it was great seeing that so many participated. I think 50% is quite a lot for voluntary participation. So next, I'd just like to share with you some of the feedback we've received from schools, parents, and students. The feedback does not include any direct quotes, but has been summarized across responses. So this data is from years 1 and 2. We tend to, our first year, we called and did phone interviews with schools. And then this last year, we just sent out a online survey for schools to fill out, which of course is not a requirement. It's completely voluntary for schools to do that. They don't have to utilize YVAPE. But it is helpful for us in making improvements. So essentially, schools have said that the things that YVAPE allows for school administrators to maintain a positive relationship with students. It shows students that the school wants to help them. They appreciated the ease to enroll students, how quickly the process gets started, the communication that is well organized and structured, and that it's free. They like that the program is fresh and not preachy. Parents and students are actually learning about vaping. It's thought-provoking and makes students think about their vaping. And YVAPE fills a need for schools, and students don't have to miss class to participate. And as I kind of mentioned earlier, their number one kind of suggestion for change or improvement for YVAPE was to expand to marijuana, which is what we've done now this year. At least vaping marijuana we're able to do. And this is some feedback that schools received from parents that they shared with us. Parents like having a role in the process, so they like having that optional voluntary component. It's feeling like they were part of the solution. They like having an alternative to traditional discipline that focuses more on education. And they also like the personal touch of the emails and coaching calls. So they like being kept informed about what was going on. And then feedback from students. So this is from that post-program survey, essentially. They liked that they learned something and that it was engaging and helpful. They did not feel talked down to, lectured at, or preached at. They thought the information was relevant, like the program's approach, and that it was an alternative to suspension. The thing that they tended to report that they liked the most was talking to the coaches, at least in that qualitative feedback. They like learning about the health effects of vaping, the videos, the ease of use of YVAPE, essentially, you know, that they could schedule their own calls and have it fit into their life, and that it helped motivate them to quit. So here's some directions we have for the future for YVAPE. So as I already mentioned to you guys, we're in the process of updating yvape.org. So that'll look a bit different in the coming months. I also already mentioned that we're producing 2 new YVAPE videos that we should be launching in January. So those will be finished this fall. Sometime this year, depending on IT, we're like to implement DocuSign for consent. In January, we'll be providing those next semester reports to schools. And some very exciting news, you guys are the first to hear this as an outside source, is January 2023, we are going to be, or at least we're planning to expand eligibility to 12-year-olds. Now that we implemented marijuana, this was the new number one requested revision for YVAPE, is to lower that age to 12. Now, KickIt California as a whole isn't lowering the age to 12, so the cessation services still are only down to 13. But YVAPE, we're able to lower it to 12. So we're going to be in the process of working on those changes this semester, and then we're planning to hopefully launch January 1st, essentially, with that. Here's a flyer that we provide to schools. The left is in English while the right is in Spanish. So the flyer can be useful to give to school admin, to students, or even to parents, and it provides kind of an overview of the program, as well as our contact information here at the bottom. So lastly, I'll just kind of have one quick slide comparing the e-referral to cessation versus YVAPE. If you guys are, yeah, so I don't have it in this presentation. I do actually have a much longer comparison that goes like, has 2 columns that compares like every aspect, what the differences are. So if that is something you guys would like, I can send that as a PDF. But it can be a bit much to go through in a presentation, but it is available if you'd like a more detailed comparison between the 2 programs. But in the most simplistic way of thinking about it, this figure just kind of shows how to figure out which program you should use when referring students. So just ask the question, is the student facing disciplinary action for vaping or smoking? If yes, you refer them to YVAPE. If no, you ask yourself, are they interested in quitting tobacco and or vapes? If yes, then use the student e-referral. So that's kind of the simplest way of looking at it. But like I said, if you'd like kind of a side-by-side comparison of them, I can provide that as well. Because there are some other noticeable differences. One, YVAPE includes marijuana. The e-referral doesn't. YVAPE will be lowering the age to 12. The e-referral doesn't. YVAPE prefers if you have your school register by reaching out to us via email first. The e-referral, you can just sign up directly on the website without that. You can do that for YVAPE too. it's just nice to kind of for us to be able to explain the program to the schools and stuff too. But essentially, one last thing. Yeah, as I mentioned, just pointing out that KIC referral for cessation is only available for tobacco products because we do not offer cessation services for marijuana. With YVAPE though, if the student is caught vaping marijuana, the student is eligible, but we can only offer psychoeducation, which is essentially the point of YVAPE anyway. And if the students we find out during YVAPE want help with cessation, they can finish YVAPE, of course, but then we also provide them with the SAMHSA referral. So if you'd like to learn more, you can check out our websites at kickitca.org and yvape.org. You can also email me at my email address, blinneman@health.ucsd.edu, or reach out to Conley, who is our outreach lead. She's the one who typically liaises with schools at her email address, which is yvape-support@health.ucsd.edu. And then this more email is what we tend to use to communicate with schools. If you'd like any of those flyers from either program, you can email either email address. All right, thank you. That is all I have. So I can open it up to any questions that you guys may have.
Awesome, Dr. Linneman. Thank you so much. I do have a few questions that were privately sent to me. In regards to YVAPE, when an administrator or a staff member is registering the student, do they get a email with the information of that registration, like a copy of that, what they just submitted?
Yes, you will automatically get a confirmation enrollment email to let you know that the enrollment was successful.
Awesome. The next question was from start to finish for YVAPE, what is the typical timeline a student should complete that process?
Our ideal timeline is a week. So essentially, or approximately a week. But it does vary. Students can do it in less time, or sometimes the students are difficult to reach. It can take 2 weeks. But essentially they get enrolled. The next day we reach out to them for that initial call. And then we typically schedule that follow-up call 1 week after, although the student can request it to be sooner or later than that. But if the student doesn't have a preference, we do it for 1 week to give them time to kind of process what they talked to the coach about, to potentially make any changes in their vaping behavior and to like watch those videos. And then students typically complete this post-program survey right after that follow-up call. So a week would be kind of the ideal timeline. We have had students complete it in 4 days. So just kind of a 3-day break between those 2 calls. And then other students have taken, much longer if they're difficult to reach or have gotten sick, for example, particularly during COVID that was happening. But yeah, about a week.
And then a follow-up question to that is there a process, or can administrators get a follow-up status on a particular student if it's been longer than a week?
Yeah, because with YVAPE, the schools are much more involved because it is an alternative to suspension program. The school can reach out to us at any time and we can tell them how far along the student is. Otherwise, what we do is essentially, if the student hasn't been answering our calls after 5 missed calls, we do email the school and let them know that we've been trying to reach the student and we haven't been able to. And we do that for both the initial call and follow-up call. So the school does know early on if we haven't been able to reach that student. But yeah, if they would just like to check in on the status, you can just email that support email address and we'll let you know how far along the program they are.
Awesome. And those are the questions that were sent to me. And we open it up now to anyone that I have a question. You can write it in the chat or unmute yourself. We'll wait about a couple minutes before we wrap up.
Also, if you think of any questions later, feel free to email me at any time and I'd be happy to answer them.
Can I ask a question? I'm just wondering, if a student fails to complete this alternative to suspension, what are some things that you've heard how admin or schools respond once this happens?
So it does vary a bit. Some schools use YVAPE for first offenses, whereas other schools use YVAPE for second offenses because they already have a program in place at the school. So of course, if it's a student who fails to complete it and it's their second offense, then schools might be a bit more inclined to then suspend the student or give them detention or do like a Saturday school thing. If it's their first offense, they may have them do some other kind of tobacco education program, or may still move on to one of the harsher punishments. It varies. Also, like because we provide that email saying how far the student made it through the program, schools may decide that if they did both of the coaching calls, but just didn't do the survey, then that was enough because they did the most important parts of the program. The survey is kind of more to help us evaluate and improve the program for students. As well as giving students a chance to kind of voice their thoughts on what they experienced. But yeah, so schools sometimes decide if they did both coaching calls, then that's enough. But that's really up to the school to make those judgments. And like I said, if the student hasn't completed the program, we are happy to reactivate the student if the school would like the student to have another chance to complete it. We don't have any like time limits on that. We just had to choose some point to kind of have kind of a deciding, but if the school wants to reactivate the student, we will.
Thank you.
And that's often what a lot of schools choose, actually, is to have them restart wherever they kind of left off. And then the school gets a bit more involved, sometimes by having them complete the calls while at school to make sure that they finish.
Great point on that. Any other questions? So what we're going to do on our end is we will have a Google folder where this recording will be dropped into. We'll also request a PDF version of the slides. That was another request that I got a lot, is will we be getting a slide deck? And then I will reach out to get those flyers specifically that Brianna shared out. And we'll put all those in that Google folder, and we'll share out that link to all the registered participants in a follow-up email. So you have the Google folder, you'll have the video link, you'll have the slide deck and the posters that Dr. Lindeman showed today during the presentation. I'm going to stop recording.